Having superpowers sounds super cool, right? But if you consider that one wrong move can change the entire trajectory of your life and the lives of others around you, it doesn't sound as cool anymore, does it? We can see that happening right now. It's the middle of the night, and outside their house in the Cheyenne Reservation, a violent storm of some kind is ravaging the entire community. Danny's father wakes her up with a terrifying jolt. They too make a run for it, but Danny goes back to grab a necklace by her nightstand. Meanwhile, father and daughter are now panicking and trying their best to run as far away from the residences as possible. They head for the woods, and behind them, Danny can hear a terrifying growl. Still, they run through the snow and into the trees. Her father stops her and makes her hide inside a tree before running back to the village. She tries to convince him to stay, but he tells her that he has to rescue the others. Soon after, she knows there's an entity approaching her. She leaves her hideout and runs full sprint through the forest before falling down a hill and passing out. When she wakes up, Danny is handcuffed to a hospital bed. She catches a quick glimpse of glowing eyes on the vents above her, but they quickly disappear. In the corner of the room, a camera is pointed at her. She drags herself and her bed to the barred windows and finds a chapel and courtyard outside before trying out the doors. With the doors locked, Danny starts to panic and screams for help. Not long after, a woman enters the room and introduces herself as Dr. Cecilia Reyes. She tells her that she is in a facility that takes care of people like her, people with strange and often uncontrollable abilities. She then drops the hard news on her. She is the sole survivor of a powerful tornado that wiped out her entire reservation. Dr. Reyes also reveals that Danny is a mutant and that their powers often manifest around puberty. This power, if wielded uncontrollably by unskilled hands, can often hurt people around them, although they still don't really know what Danny's powers are yet. Later, Dr. Reyes holds a counseling session with the rest of the mutants in the facility. Dr. Reyes asks them to tell her the first instance when their powers manifested. As Ron Sinclair opens her mouth to speak, Danny walks into the room. She isn't exactly given a warm welcome, as one of the mutants, Berto da Costa, makes inappropriate remarks, as well as Ileana Rasputin, who is just plain hostile towards the new girl. The other mutant, Sam Guthrie, remains quiet. Dr. Reyes reprimands the teens for their behavior and tries to encourage them to make Danny feel at home, before telling Ron to proceed. She does, and she tells everyone about the incident when she first manifested her powers. She felt free, but then she felt like it was wrong, so she went to the Reverend in hopes he could fix her. Instead of a fix, however, he cursed her, called her a witch, and beat her. After Ron finishes her story, Dr. Reyes asks who wants to be next, and Ileana asks the new girl to speak. As she and Berto make more inappropriate remarks, Dr. Reyes scolds them again, with the threat of solitary confinement. As Ileana gets up to walk out, Dr. Reyes assigns her to serve as Danny's guide around the facility. She obliges, and Danny follows her around and asks some questions. Before they leave the building, Ileana shushes her and speaks to her dragon puppet, Lockheed, and tells it that she hates Danny too. Despite the rudeness, once they get out of the building, Ileana still lazily shows her around and tells her what each of the buildings are. She's really not feeling it, so she just sprays graffiti on a fountain, telling Danny to be her lookout. Danny asks her if she knows where they are, but she doesn't know. Ileana tells her that Dr. Reyes always tells them that the closest town is 20 miles away, probably to keep them from making a run for it. As she says that, Danny notices that there's no fence around the facility. Ileana agrees and tells her that there really isn't anything between her and freedom. With that, Danny sprints away, determined to leave the place, but she suddenly slams hard against an invisible force field surrounding the facility. Ileana laughs at her from afar, and Danny, infuriated, tries to attack her, but she just disappears in a quick flash. Meanwhile, from afar, a large wolf watches the two of them. After this incident, we follow Danny as she notices the large clock tower by the church. She realizes that after everything that has happened, she really is all alone. Her family is gone. Her home is gone. Everything she knows outside of the facility is just gone. So, she climbs the watchtower. She tears down a few boards from the clock and crawls along the sides. As she gazes at the soft ground below, she contemplates jumping off. But before she can, Ron comes over and talks to her, managing to convince her to come back inside and stick around a little longer. Ron then continues the tour that Ileana never really finished. She shows Danny where Sam always practices, and Danny learns that his superpower is flying at super speed. He practices this by hooking himself up to a large weight, but as they watch him, they contemplate that he might just be hurting himself more than just practice. After lunch, Ron tells her that Sam actually grew up in a small town in Kentucky. Even though he was doing really well in school, he had to drop out to help his dad in the mines and support their family. Meanwhile, Berto is sort of the opposite. He comes from the richest family in Brazil, and his parents sent him here to be cured, but he won't really tell them what his power is. Meanwhile, the two just agree that Ileana is just crazy. After this trip around the facility, Danny returns to her quarters to go to sleep. Berto and Sam hang out in the laundry room as Berto does his chores. Robert asks Sam about his time at the mines, and Sam tells him that it was scary down there. Meanwhile, as Danny slips into her deep sleep, she dreams about the incident that happened at their reservation. In the laundry room, the lights flicker. Berto fixes the flickering lights and then leaves Sam in the laundry room as he heads for his room. As Danny keeps dreaming, her sonic energy becomes elevated. She dreams about running away through the snow as something huge growls behind her. As it inches closer and closer in the laundry room, we can see Sam getting shocked at the sound one of the washing machines is making. He approaches it, and all of a sudden a hand touches the glass, taking him back underground, into the mines. He walks past a group of miners and approaches his dad. His dad turns around and confronts him, and just as the rest of the miners attack him, the machine blows up, and he is knocked back into reality. As all this is happening, we see Dr. Reyes with a troubled look on her face as she watches Danny's psionic powers elevate on camera, prompting the system to tell her that further analysis is required. The next day, Danny goes into the communal shower, and there, she chats with Ron. She notices a W-shaped branding on her shoulder and makes a small joke about how tattooing probably wasn't painful enough. Instead of a laugh, however, Ron regards the question with a cold shoulder and tells her that she doesn't really want to talk about it before leaving. In the other bathroom, we then see a troubled Sam, staring himself down in the mirror. There is so much hate and malice in his eyes, all clearly hate for himself. As he cries, his power partly activates, and he starts punching himself to the ground. In the next counseling session, Dr. Reyes pushes them to practice control through meditation. A while after this therapy session, the kids are all hanging out in the recreation room. Ron is busy watching a movie, the two boys are playing foosball, and Ileana is just playing around with Lockheed. When Danny enters the room, Ileana provokes her with racist remarks. She calls her Standing Rock and asks her if she wanted to have a buffalo wing, since her people love buffalo. Sam tries to get her to quit it, but Danny stops him and answers back to Ileana. She tells her that she isn't scared of her, but Ileana retorts by making fun of her dad too. To that, Danny takes Lockheed from her hand and cusses her out. When Danny hits her, Ileana takes out the soul sword power she has, but just before she hits Danny, Dr. Reyes comes into the room and protects Danny. As punishment, she sends the two to solitary confinement. Just before bed, Danny overhears Ileana talking to her puppet, Lockheed. She tells him not to be scared, and that they're going to their special place. The smiling men can't hurt them in their special place, after all. As they all sleep, Danny is shocked to find that her room is snowing. She looks up and strangely enough, she sees the sky. Suddenly, the white snow turns into the dark color of blood, just as the cameras in her room alert Dr. Reyes of an anomaly happening inside her holding cell. As Danny keeps dreaming, she finds herself in the middle of a field, when all of a sudden, a dark fog consumes the sky, and from it, a large bear emerges and attacks her. She screams, and when Dr. Reyes opens the door to her holding cell, she is standing by the bed, wet with snow and droplets of blood. After this, the readings on Danny from the facility calls for more tests, especially since her mutant powers are still undetermined. The next day, we follow Ron into the chapel's confession box. Like routine, she says her confession to no one on the other side, but as she does, she notices that the door to the other box opens slightly, as if someone is coming in. As she sits there, she starts hearing voices telling her that she is inhuman, and she is going to hell. Hearing this, she panics and runs out of the chapel, and tries to calm herself down, repeating that demons can't come into churches. A while later, after Dr. Reyes falls asleep, Danny knocks on Ron's door to ask her how she is doing. Then Sam and Berta walk past them, along with Ileana. Danny asks them where they are going, and despite Ileana's protest, the two invite them over to the attic, since it is the only place in the facility that isn't monitored by Dr. Reyes. There, the teens bond, and they play a game with the lie detector test. Berto tries it first. He is questioned about how many girls he's been with, and his answer is proven to be a lie. He changes the number, and when he is still caught lying, Danny asks him why. He simply responds that he gets too hot. Next up is Sam. Danny asks him why he kept holding on to a piece of coal, and Sam tells them that it was a piece of coal that his dad handed to him before he passed on. Danny asks a follow-up question, but Ileana interrupts her and starts asking Danny instead, even when she's not hooked up to the machine. At first, Ileana asks her what her power is, but Danny truthfully answers that even she herself doesn't know. Ileana then asks her about the bear necklace on her neck. Danny tells the group that, just like Sam, it was something given to her by her father. Ileana rolls her eyes at this, and Danny tells everyone the origin story of the bear. She had always been afraid of the dark. So, her father told her about the legend of the demon bear that exists inside of them and feeds off their fears. The bear just keeps growing the more afraid we become, so her father carved that pendant for her, to remind her of how small the bear was when she was born, so she could remember to never be afraid. After that story, Ileana takes a turn on the lie detector, and they ask her why she is in the facility. She tells them coldly and truthfully that she ended 18 men with her sword. As they debate whether or not she is lying, we see that Dr. Reyes has been watching them all along from a hidden camera in the attic. The very next day, she tells them all about obedience. She tells them that it was their shot of leaving her care to go to her boss facility. Sam questions this. Dr. Reyes brushes him off by saying that if he wasn't in the facility, he would be in prison or worse, after what he did. He starts trying to tell her about the terrible nightmares he's been having, and starts questioning if he will ever be better, but she doesn't listen, causing Sam to walk out of group therapy. Later that night, Ileana spikes Dr. Reyes' drink. With the doctor asleep, the kids enjoy themselves. Ron and Danny dance around with tambourines. Sam and Berto play around with a wheelchair, and a while after, in the recreation room, Ileana makes a mocking imitation of Dr. Reyes, who is always referring to her superior. The guys believe that this person she keeps alluding to is Professor Charles Xavier, the founder of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, and they believe that this special facility is actually a mutant academy where they will become X-Men. Danny questions why they would want to be X-Men in the first place, and Berto agrees. A while later, Ron takes Danny somewhere as the two boys drink. As they crawl along the vents, Sam and Berto talk. Sam reveals the incident that brought him to the facility in the first place. He was still new to the mines, and one day, he got really claustrophobic and freaked out. It was there that his powers manifested, causing a huge blast in the mines, ending his own father and most of his crew. He could never forgive himself for what he did. Berto apologizes, and when Sam asks him why he is there, a sudden look of fear crosses Berto's face, and he walks away, telling Sam he did nothing. Back to Danny and Ron, we see them get out of the building through the vents. They walk to this mass graveyard outside and lay down in the grass. With the rain pouring outside the dome, they look up and see the beautiful night sky, riddled with ripples caused by the droplets falling on the force field. As the two talk, they share their first kiss under the sky. Meanwhile, we see Berto again, laying down on the couch and looking at the picture of his girlfriend on his phone. Beyond the recreation room, he hears splashes, and he heads straight to the pool, where he sees Ileana. He asks if she wants company, and she taunts him to get in the water. As the two hook up in the pool, Berto suddenly pulls away as steam emits from his body. He then tells Ileana that he can't get too hot. He tells her that the first time his powers manifested, he was with his girlfriend, and when he tried to hold her, he burned her with his bare hands, and ended her right then and there. Ileana comforts him, saying that he couldn't hurt her, but he does have to catch her again. She then disappears from the pool, and Berto starts looking around for her. But as we pan out to the control room, we see that Berto is all alone in the pool, while Ileana is fully clothed and was just playing around in her room. Then, Berto feels a warm hand on his back, but as he turns around, he sees a demonic, burning manifestation of his girlfriend Mariella, who moves to attack him. The smoke from her body causes the fire alarms to blare. Dr. Reyes hears this and heads straight for the control room, where she sees a fire erupting in the pool room. She heads over there, followed closely by Sam, and they find Berto's power manifesting. He has flames all over, so Dr. Reyes pushes him back into the pool. When his flames are subdued, he then sees Ileana, standing by the pool, bewildered. Panicked, Berto nabs Dr. Reyes' phone and tries to open the facility doors to call the cops. In this confrontation, Berto tells her that they are trapped inside the facility with demons. Ileana chimes in and tells her that she isn't really a doctor. With that, Dr. Reyes punishes Ileana for what she caused and throws a screaming Ileana into solitary confinement. She then initiates lockdown on the entire facility. The next day, she continues with her tests on Danny. After injecting her with something, she asks Danny what she remembers before she was admitted to their facility. She says she remembers running away from the tornado, but later on, she realizes that she was actually running from the demon bear. As she makes this connection, sudden memories flood into her head. But they aren't hers. She sees children being made to do terrible things inside a facility. She sees them being harmed and tested on. She panics and screams for Dr. Reyes to stop. Meanwhile, in solitary confinement, Ileana's door quietly opens. She gets up, and after nudging the door open, she sees a creepy painting of a tall smiling man, haphazardly painted onto the wall. Ileana asks Lockheed what is going on, and she realizes that it is all Danny. We then see Ron in the shower. Behind her, she hears footsteps. Then, she sees the old reverend that tortured her. She tells him that he isn't real, and that she already ended him. But even with his mangled face, he declares himself alive in front of her. The showers start to spray boiling hot water, and he tackles her to the ground and brands her again. Her screams alert everyone in the facility, and as her transformed wolf body runs out of the bathroom, they all see that the mark on her neck was 100% real. Ileana then gets out of her cells, and tells all of them that it's all Danny's fault. She figured out her powers, and with that, she takes Danny to a hellish landscape with her magic. As she chokes her, however, Danny manifests the faces of the smiling men she was afraid of. Ileana screams and steps away, allowing Dr. Reyes to sedate her. Before she passes out, however, she tells her that Danny is inside all of their heads, and she is going to end them all. A while later, Danny goes to Ileana's room, where she's busy drawing. She hands her Lockheed, which she apparently dropped in the confrontation earlier, and asks about the place that Ileana took her to. Ileana calls it limbo, and at first, it was just a made-up place that she and Lockheed made up in their minds. They would retreat there whenever bad things would happen to her, and eventually, they stayed there for so long that it became a real place. Danny then asks her about a memory of hers that she saw, and Ileana tells her about the smiling men. She never knew who they were, except for the fact that it made them happy to see her cry. Meanwhile, in the control room, Dr. Reyes receives a message regarding Danny. Apparently, she is extremely dangerous to them, and she should be terminated. After she gives the confirmation code, it is revealed that she isn't part of the X-Men. No, she is employed by Essex Corporation. Later that night, Danny pays a visit to Ron in the infirmary. Ron comforts her, telling her that it wasn't her fault that the Reverend came to life. Here, Danny tells Ron of what she saw while Dr. Reyes was testing her. They were never in the hospital, and they were heading towards the facility that she saw in her vision. Then, Dr. Reyes comes over to take her away for more tests. Suspicious now of the doctor's intention, she asks if she could come with them, but the doctor dismisses her before wheeling Danny into a strange room. As Ron joins Ileana and Sam in the recreation room, they suddenly hear music. Ileana knows that sound, and they follow it back to her room. There, she finds a memory. She sees her younger self, hiding away from a tall man wearing a smiley face mask, who comes for her. Ileana panics, saying that she's already buried this memory, and when the man hears this, he takes off the mask to reveal how she remembers the men that hurt her back then. She now remembers them as these terrifying supernatural creatures, and now they are there to hurt her again. They now look like grotesque, blind monsters with a huge smiling mouth, ready to consume them. As Ron runs away to fetch Dr. Reyes, Sam and Ileana run away from the creatures. Berto, who is busy doing the dishes, is also attacked by one of them, but he manages to subdue it with his powers. As all of this is happening, Danny is actually being prepared to be euthanized. She screams for help, and eventually, Ron hears her. Just as Dr. Reyes is pumping Dan's IV bag with poison, Ron manages to get to the room from the vents and attack her. She injures Dr. Reyes, but she still manages to escape, carrying a briefcase. Ron sets Danny free, and they both struggle to get out. Meanwhile, Sam and Ileana finally reach Dr. Reyes, who simply runs away from them as she sees the smiling monsters. With the beings surrounding them from both sides of the corridor, Ileana has a meltdown, and instead of helping Sam, she teleports into her and Lockheed's special place. All alone now, Sam uses his powers too, until he comes across Berto, who is trying to get out, only to find that the force fields are now covering the building they are in, trapping them all inside. With the two boys together, they try to head upstairs to fetch the two girls, but as they do, a bunch of those terrifying monsters show up again, but Ileana teleports through and slashes them all down before they can harm them. They all head over to Dr. Reyes' office, and there, they find a file on Ileana. She is the most viable weapon out of all of them, and Essex wants to invest in her. After realizing that they need to end Dr. Reyes to destroy the force field, they all team up together to find her and end their imprisonment once and for all. They end up finding her in the infirmary, bleeding out from her injuries. She tells them all that she has the responsibility to stop them from escaping by whatever means necessary, all except Danny. She uses her force field powers to trap each one of them inside their own bubble. As she takes the air away, she then tells everyone what Danny's power is. She takes your greatest fears and your worst secrets, and uses them against you until you lose your life. With all of them trapped, they have no way of stopping Dr. Reyes as she suffocates Danny. Danny quickly passes out, and when she does, something terrifying happens. Outside, a violent snow starts coming down, and then all of a sudden, a giant bear bursts through the walls and mauls Dr. Reyes, tearing down the force fields. But it isn't over yet. The bear is still furious, and it's now going to attack them. The group try their best to hide, as they try to wake up the unconscious Danny. In her head, Danny could hear them, but she is still there in the middle of the forest, as snow is pouring down on the bodies of the community that she accidentally destroyed when she manifested the demon bear. As Ron and Berto take Danny to the chapel to keep her safe, Ileana and Sam try their best to subdue the bear, but even with their strong powers, they are no match for the giant beast. Still, they try. Berto eventually joins in the fight too, despite being deathly afraid of his own powers, but even he is subdued. Before jumping in to attack the bear, Ron tells Danny one last time that they need her before going in. Inside her head, Danny is led by Ron in her wolf form into her hiding spot that fateful night. As she cowers there, fearing that she can't face the beast that she created, she sees a vision of her father. She apologizes to him, but he just tells her that it wasn't her fault, and encourages her to face the demon bear. After all, she is bigger now. With that, Danny finally wakes up, just as Ron is about to be taken by the bear. She calls out to it, and the bear, in all its anger, faces her. It growls, but Danny just tells it to calm down. As Danny bravely approaches the bear, it slowly starts to settle down. Danny reassures it, tells it that it doesn't need to worry anymore, before telling it to go to sleep. As Danny hides her bear necklace away, the demon bear disappears too. Now, with Dr. Reyes gone, the force field has disappeared too. After the mutants gather up their belongings, they all head out of the facility, finally free and in control of their fears.